The call came just as the morning sun spilled golden light across the cracked windshield of Ryan Qureshi's aging car. His phone buzzed violently against the dashboard, and for a split second, he hesitated because he already knew it was his boss. And he already knew what it meant. He answered anyway, his voice tight, breath uneven from the chaos of the past hour. Before he could speak, the voice on the other end cut through him like a blade. Cold. Impatient. Final. Ryan stood frozen in the parking lot, the words echoing louder than the traffic around him. He had lost his job. Just like that. No warning. No understanding. No second chance, all because he was late, and all because he chose to help someone. Before we go further, if you believe kindness still matters in this world, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Spread Love Daily. Because stories like this deserve to be heard. Ryan slowly lowered the phone, his fingers trembling. His chest felt hollow, as if something inside him had been ripped out. He leaned back against the car, closing his eyes, trying to steady himself. The sounds of the city moved on as if nothing had changed. But for him, everything had. Just an hour earlier, his world had been fragile but intact. He had woken before sunrise, just like every other day, quietly preparing breakfast while his 6-year-old daughter, Meher, slept curled up under her faded blanket. Her tiny breaths were soft, peaceful, completely unaware of how hard her father worked to keep their world from falling apart. Ryan had lost his wife 3 years ago in a sudden illness that came like a storm and left devastation behind. Since then, every single day had been a battle. He worked long hours at a mid-sized corporate office, barely earning enough to cover rent, school fees, and groceries. There was no luxury in his life, only responsibility. That morning, like every morning, he had kissed Meher's forehead before leaving, whispering a promise he made daily, that everything would be okay. But life doesn't always wait for promises to be fulfilled. As Ryan drove toward work, already cutting it close, he noticed a small crowd forming near the side of the road. At first, he thought it was just another minor incident, something he couldn't afford to get involved in. He had responsibilities. He had a job to protect, but then he saw her daughter, a pregnant woman, sitting on the pavement, clutching her stomach in visible pain. Her face was pale, her breath sharp and desperate. People stood around, watching, murmuring, but no one stepped forward. Ryan's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his watch ticked loudly in his mind. He was already late. Just drive, a voice inside him urged. You can't lose this job. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, spoke from somewhere deeper. It reminded him of the nights he had held his wife's hand in the hospital, praying someone would care. It reminded him of Meher, what kind of world he wanted her to grow up in. Without another thought, Ryan pulled over. He rushed to the woman's side, kneeling beside her. Her pain was real, urgent. There was no time to wait for an ambulance that might come too late. Ignoring the whispers around him, he gently helped her into his car, assuring her everything would be okay, even though he had no idea if it would. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light was an enemy. Every second stretched like a lifetime. The woman's breathing grew more strained, and Ryan's heart pounded in rhythm with her pain. When they finally reached the hospital, he didn't wait. He carried her inside, calling for help, his voice breaking with urgency. Doctors rushed in. Nurses surrounded them. And just like that, she was taken from his arms and into theirs. Ryan stood there, breathless, his shirt damp with sweat, his hands still shaking, and then he remembered work. His phone was flooded with missed calls. His stomach dropped. By the time he reached his office, it was too late. The explanation didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. Policies were policies. Being late meant consequences, and now, he was standing in a parking lot with no job, no backup plan, and a daughter waiting at home who depended on him for everything. The weight of it all pressed down on him, suffocating. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Ryan searched endlessly for work, but opportunities were scarce. Rejections came quickly, often without explanation. His savings began to shrink, and the fear he tried so hard to hide from Meher started to creep into his voice, his eyes, his silence. Still, every evening, he smiled for her. He helped with her homework, told her stories, tucked her into bed with the same promise, that everything would be okay. But inside, he wasn't sure anymore. One afternoon, just as the sun hung high and unforgiving in the sky, Ryan received a call from an unknown number. He almost ignored it. Almost, but something made him answer. The voice on the other end was calm, composed, and unfamiliar. It asked him to come to a corporate office downtown for a meeting. No details. No explanation. Just a request. Confused but desperate, Ryan agreed. The building he entered was nothing like the places he had been applying to. It was massive, polished, intimidating. The kind of place where people like him didn't belong. He adjusted his worn-out shirt, feeling painfully out of place as he approached the reception. His name was already on their list. He was escorted upstairs without delay. When the doors opened, he stepped into a room filled with quiet authority, and then he saw her, the same woman, the one he had helped, but she was different now. Strong. Composed. Sitting at the head of the table with a presence that commanded respect, Ryan froze. She looked at him, her eyes softening with recognition. In that moment, the world seemed to pause. She began to speak, her voice steady but filled with something deeper, gratitude, perhaps, or something even more profound. She explained how that day had changed everything. How she had gone into labor earlier than expected. How doctors had told her that if she had arrived even 10 minutes later, both her life and her baby's life could have been in danger, and how Ryan, an absolute stranger, had been the only one who chose to act. What Ryan didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was that she wasn't just anyone. She owned the company, not just the building he stood in, but the entire corporate network that had once employed him. The silence that followed felt unreal. Ryan stood there, overwhelmed, unsure of what to say, what to feel. She continued, explaining how she had tracked him down. How she learned about his job, his dismissal, and the reason behind it. And how deeply it affected her, because while policies matter, humanity matters more. She offered him something that didn't just feel like an opportunity, but like a turning point. A position far beyond what he had lost. Stability. Respect. A future, but more than that, she offered him recognition, not for his skills or his resume, but for his character, because in a world where everyone hesitated, he chose kindness. Ryan felt his eyes fill with tears he had been holding back for weeks. Not out of weakness, but from the overwhelming weight of relief, of being seen, of knowing that maybe, just maybe, his struggles had not been in vain. As he walked out of that building later that day, the sunlight felt different. Warmer. Softer. Like a quiet promise finally being fulfilled. That evening, when he returned home, Meher ran into his arms as always. But this time, when he whispered that everything would be okay, he truly meant it, because sometimes, life tests you in the hardest ways, and sometimes, the very thing that seems like your greatest loss, becomes the doorway to something greater than you ever imagined. Before this story ends, if it touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your support helps spread stories that remind the world what truly matters, and tell me in the comments, would you have stopped to help that woman? Because the world changes, one act of kindness at a time, and in the end, it's not what we lose that defines us. It's what we choose to do when it costs us everything.